Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy comes your way now. And make sure to join me, Larry Elder, tonight at 7, only on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Had a big celebration on Thursday when House Republicans unveiled their tax plan. And then the reviews started coming in, as well as the prognostications about its possibility of passing both the House and Senate in the form in which it was introduced, or something substantially similar to that. And some of the enthusiasm is dampened. I don't know if it's dampened for Grover Norquist, though. I mean, he was positively effusive in his piece in FoxNews.com. Republican tax bill is an amazingly powerful job creation measure. And he focuses on the doubling of the standard deduction, the rate cuts, the abolishment of the estate tax, the alternative minimum tax, and, of course, the reductions in the corporate tax, as well as pass-through income for owner-operators of businesses. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid president of Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Grover, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
So are you still as enthusiastic as you were last week? Because, say, for example, Ron Johnson, not so enthusiastic about 25% rate for pass-through income, and others are suggesting that, including Jimmy Pethokoukis we had on the show yesterday, that this is about $1 trillion more than they have created space for, and so there are going to have to be substantial gives that will reduce the growth prospects of any plan that's passed.
Yeah, I think we're in very good shape. The House is committed to getting this done. It should be out of committee in this week. The committee will have certain amendments because, when you write a bill that has this many moving parts, you always find something that you could do in a little bit of a better way. I don't expect any votes on the floor of the House. The House will present the bill. It will pass. It'll have strong support. There'll be one or two people. Look, you can always get on TV if you're the Republican who's against the tax cut, okay? Because that makes you interesting.
Yeah.
That makes you a maverick. And so even the guys who are going to vote for the bill, it is wise for them to say, in a bill, there are 100 things in any of these bills that I could do that better if there was room for larger tax cuts. There is a limit to how much we're able to cut taxes in this bill, largely put there by senators, and we have to live within that box at present. And so I think there are a couple of things. One, taking the corporate rate down from 35 to 20 is something that we should have done about 20 years ago. The rest of the world saw us take our rate from 50 to 34, and they said, that's awfully important. And they started moving their rates down. Socialist China's at 25%. We're at 35%. And people wonder, why can't we compete better against China? Because our government damages our businesses and our jobs with its stupid tax policy. Don't go whining at the Chinese. Chairman Mao didn't do this to us, okay? Our government, the IRS, our Congress, our Senate, our president, they did this. They allowed this to happen. We're going to jump ahead and move down to 20% on the corporate level. Pass-throughs are slightly different. That's going to 25. For pass-throughs, half of the businesses half of the people in this country work for a pass-through, half work for a corporation. Pass-throughs include self-employed people, people who work in partnerships, people who pay their business taxes through their personal income tax. Mm-hmm. And because the Democrats have spent the last X number of decades saying, let's really screw the top 1% and that they should have to pay, 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the people who are paying that highest rate are, in fact, businesses, not individuals, being NFL stars or something. They're on the top rate, but businesses that may have several people on salary, and they look like they're a rich person, but they're an ongoing business. So the effort is to bring that rate down to 25 from as high as 44 right now for individuals. The government, the IRS, our tax law particularly damages small businesses, self-employed people, and the people who did it are the liberal Democrat senators and congressmen who are going, we're taxing the Kennedy kids. No, you're not. You're actually taxing, in most cases, people who are working very hard on Saturdays, unlike you in Congress, to make additional money and hire people. So that tax has been very damaging to smaller businesses.
But broadly speaking, some of the mavericks that might pop up on some of these weekend TV shows, this is not paid for. And do you dispute some of the numbers that it's going to increase the federal deficit by $693 billion during this fiscal year and $2 trillion to the national debt over the next decade? And are those legitimate reasons to vote no or keep working on amending the bill so that those numbers aren't so jarring?
Well, two things. When people say that it'll increase the deficit, they are looking at static models that we know are incorrect. We know that when you cut marginal tax rates, people save more, invest more, and revenues go up. It's not a dollar for dollar. You don't cut $1 and you get $1. Although in 2003, when we cut the capital gains tax and the dividend tax, over the next 4 years, we actually raised more tax dollars than we had expected to before the tax cut. So if somebody says tax cuts never pay for themselves, actually the last tax cut we had more than paid for itself. It brought in more money than we would have had without the tax cut.
But Grover, on that point of scoring, and Paul Ryan makes this point too. It's right. Static modeling is bad modeling, but per the strictures that they're under, they can't dynamically score this. They have to abide by static modeling for the purposes of getting this past the Senate rules that have been implemented. Right?
That's sort of true. They have promised to do dynamic modeling, and they've given us some. But the Joint Tax Committee cannot work fast enough. So if you're moving 20 dials at once and you go to Joint Tax and say, what does this do? They say, we'll see in a month. Well, you can't make policy that way because Joint Tax can't do this quick enough. If they had a model and you just plug the numbers in, it would work. But they don't. They have a series of assumptions they think up and that they make up, frankly. It's not a computer model. So they can't do this fast enough. Therefore, what they agreed to with the Senate, House and Senate said, we believe that this will generate at least $1.5 trillion over a decade in higher revenue. If you increased growth from 2% a year to 3% a year for a decade, it would increase revenue by $2.6 trillion. So that's a very, very low estimate on how much growth you'll get. Reagan went from 2% growth to 4% growth for the 7-8 years after his tax cut took effect. So there's a very significant growth you got from the Reagan tax cuts increase. In today's dollars, that would have added more than $5 trillion to the national treasury from growth alone.
How there was a Politico story the other day about the quote unquote hidden 46% tax bracket, an extra 6 percentage point tax on the next $200,000 that millionaires make that effectively creates that new rate that people worried about, 45.6% bracket. Is that a legitimate criticism of the plan?
Sure. It's if you make between $1 million and $1.2 million, when you hit the million, they remove some of the deductions that you had going up. That you or I would take those deductions, but if you made $1 million, you would then lose those deductions. This was done because they needed the revenue and they needed to make things right. Do I wish they weren't? It does have this effect on marginal tax rates. It's not a legal change in the marginal rate, but it's an effective change in the marginal rate. This happens and has been going on for 50 years. They do this all the time. We get rid of a bunch of that from the past, but in this case, it's there. Over time, I think that it'll be capable of phasing that out. It's not a reason for voting no. I wish we had more room for actual tax reduction in this package, but given the room that we have, this will generate significant growth. And keep in mind, this is not the last plane out of Casablanca. This is a tax cut, and there will be a tax cut every year that you have a Republican House and Senate and a president. So watch for a tax cut early next spring. I believe the Republicans will win the House and Senate largely because of the growth that will flow from this tax bill and the deregulation that's already taken place. And we've already had growth move from 2% up to 3%. But that's mostly been because of deregulation that's taken place. The tax cut hasn't hit yet.
Can you give us
the tax cuts effect?
Can you give us kind of bird's eye view with a Republican administration, House and Senate? It's great we're talking about growth. Have you been satisfied with spending cuts? If in fact this growth comes to fruition and more money is flowing into the Treasury, is there a concern that there will just be more spending? What have you seen from this administration in terms of cuts that are satisfying?
Well, the most important changes we can make are to reform entitlements so they cost less. That's where the money is in the budget. It's not even in the Defense Department anymore. It used to be. But we need reforms. We need reforms in the Pentagon, too. My brother is the comptroller over there. They're auditing the Pentagon for the first time ever this year, long overdue. But they need different reforms. Entitlement reforms are very important. And next year is when the Republicans, the budget, when they do reconciliation, it'll be focused on reforming the various welfare programs, as we did with Bill Clinton. Remember, he signed the reform of aid to families with dependent children, welfare. But during the Obama years, they poked huge holes in that, the work requirement, the time limits involved. And so we're going to go back and do reform on Medicaid, food stamps, welfare programs, and let states have more flexibility while requiring that people have serious work requirements. If you're an able-bodied person, you are expected to work, not just get a check. If you can't get out of bed, that's one thing. But if you're able-bodied and capable of working, you will be working if you're going to get a temporary assistance. And there'll be a term limit on it. You can't do this for 40 years. And you can't do it for 3 generations. You can do it for a couple of years, and then you're expected to get on your feet. So those reforms will significantly bend down the cost curve on welfare. And I'm much more interested in reforming government to cost less than sort of cutting it, because when you just say, cut it 10%, well, some things need to be gone 100%, and some things need to be where they are. So I want to reform those things. I want all 57 states out there doing different things, and let's learn if Rhode Island has a good idea, or if California has a third stupid idea, they could do that. And no one's life is a complete failure. Some people serve as bad examples.
Yes.
Illinois, at present, helps the rest of the country.
Just keep beating us up. Just keep beating us up.
You're welcome, rest of the country. Yes. Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform. Tax Reform. Thanks, as always, for joining us, Grover. Appreciate it.
You got it.
And you joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect.